Hi, welcome back to the American Brabant Association YouTube channel. Today I have with me Sherry Holland. I'm Jason Julian, president of the American Brabant Association. Sherry serves on
the Equine Health Committee for the Clydesdale Breeders Association.
Sherry's been treating CPL in Clydesdales predominantly and Gypsy Vanners. I'm one of the head inspectors for the ABA scoring legs. I've probably palpated and inspected close to 200 horses now on this North American continent and in Germany and Luxembourg. Sherry has treated
74 plus
horses.
Yeah, Clydesdale, predominantly Clydesdales, a few Gypsy Vanners.
In the Midwest?
In the Midwest.
Yeah, so the more, and this will come back later, the more moist or damp half of our country. I got into this 15 years ago with 100% European Belgian. Didn't know anything about it. And after a little while, I called Karen Gruner. Dr. Karen Gruner is the founder of our association. She's another head CPL educator and inspector. And I'm like, Karen, why is my horse itching and scratching on everything on the farm? He'll itch a round bell ring all the way across. And she's like, oh, you got to look under the feathers. So that was my introduction to CPL. And you got into it how?
By unknowingly purchasing a CPL mare that was sold as a horse that just had a case of bad scratches.
Yeah.
And
there's a little more than that. What is CPL for those that maybe this is the first video they've seen?
It's Chronic Progressive Lymphedema, and it appears that there is a genetic component that relates back to heavily feathered, coarse feather, and from what Jason's seen, thicker bone. And now that you say that, I see the same.
Yeah.
In Clydesdales.
We can show it outside if we want, but we have a 13-year experiment going on here with 3 half sisters, and you've inspected all 3 now, and one is a 13.5-inch cannon bone, I believe. This is in another video. Hopefully Susan can link that video. But one has the thickest cannon bone and the coarsest feathers, and she'll be in the videos today for treating. And one is moderately boned and moderately feathered, and she has medium CPL for a 14-year-old horse. And one is more average bone, heavier than an American Belgian, but lighter than a European Belgian for sure, and lighter feathers. And you inspected Eve, and she has almost none at 14 years old. And I would agree, I've seen that over several hundred horses. Nothing we're going to say today is absolute. You would agree with that?
I would agree.
Yes. But in general, and I would say with a 90% certainty, the heavier the bone, the heavier the feathers, the coarser the feathers, the worse and the more aggressive the CPL is.
I agree.
You agree?
Yeah,
even in the Clydes and stuff?
Oh, yeah, definitely in the Clydes.
You and I both talked about there's definitely management. There is definitely a management aspect to it. Having your horse stand around, having your horse get overweight, feeding a lot of carbohydrates. Mm-hmm. This is stuff you talked about. Talk to me about your insulin, like insulin resistant horses. And I mean,
yeah, a lot of the horses I see that have gone from show barns or past their prime and have gone on to individuals like myself who don't know, have never owned a draft, and might not have ever had horses in their adult life, get them and they're pretty and they want a pretty pet, and they feed them a lot of sugary feeds, and they stand in beautiful barns and stalls, out
of the flies, out of the heat. You're trying to make their life nice.
Yeah, and it just is a recipe for disaster. You end up with a lot of metabolic disorders, a lot of founders that go untreated, and then it's just a cascade of events. After a foundered horse, they can't repair properly, and then CPL has some of the same characteristics as far as not being able to heal.
The flesh can't heal.
The flesh can't heal, and it just...
So if the friend or the enemy of CPL, the friend for your horse, is motion and activity,
movement.
If you have your horse locked up in a stall, or worse yet, in mud, or founder them and now they don't want to move at all, it's just a hand-in-hand bad snowball effect.
It is.
Yeah. So the lymphatic system has fluids, and the lymphatic system does not have a pump like the circulatory system. The circulatory system has the heart. The lymphatic system, all it has is motion from the horse and the pulsing of the capillaries of the horse from having a raised heart rate. Mm-hmm. So the more that horse moves and works and gets its heart rate up, the more they can expel that lymphatic system from the bottom of the legs back up into the horse's main cavity. Well, when we see pooling of the lymphatic system and swelling, then we start seeing breaking down of the skin and other problems.
Yes.
And then there's other components to make the horse miserable, like we talked about with choreoptic mange.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about that a little bit, the mites and choreoptic mange, and what you do when you see a horse itching and chewing its own feathers. What's the first step you take when you come in to treat a horse?
You absolutely want to treat them for mites first. And I've found there's a lot of different things that will deter mites or knock them back. But for a horse that's already dealing with CPL and leg issues, I don't feel like you should play around. You need to get an antiparasitic like ivermectin.
Show the one here. This is an off-make.
This is one brand, and it's alcohol based. And so you want to make sure that when you do apply it to the leg, you're not putting it on an open wound, because they're not going to be too appreciative of being touched to start with. So you're going to have to wrestle them for a few minutes till they calm down, and you don't want to put it on an open sore.
So what's the strength of this one?
This one is 5 mg per mil for the ivermectin. And I've found a good dosage for, of course, most of my horses are about 2,000, 1,600 to 2,000 pounds. And it's about 25 to 30 mils.
Milliliters.
Yeah.
So where do you apply it? How do you apply it?
I apply it 5 mils per leg, dock of tail, base of mane, because you'll see a lot rubbing mane as well.
So that's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 at the tail, 30 at the mane.
Yeah.
So basically, if you had a 5 milliliter syringe, you're talking six syringe fulls in 6 spots.
In 6 different spots. I try to spread it out just so that it's more easily and quickly absorbed and goes to the affected area. On the legs, I feel like it's very important to put it where the main sources of hyperkeratosis. So you've got the buildup of the flaky, dandruff-looking skin. So I put it at the ergot, at the heel bulb, the coronary band, inside pastern is really important. On just the insides, it would be like the medial quarter area, because I feel mites congregate a lot like other parasites. They know where to go to keep from being removed, from the body. And so those are the hardest places for the horse to chew. And so I make sure that it goes there. And then behind the knee and hock. And then at the dock of the tail, I'll put the whole 5 mils. And then along the mane, I'll break it up into 3 or 4 little spots along the mane. And if you have one that's actively chewing and stomping, they for sure have a infestation. So you want to apply this and then wait 14 to 21 days and do a second application to kill new hatch, because that's the life cycle.
3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Can I pause you just for a second here? Sherry and I, neither one of us have 3 letters in front of our name. We're not veterinarians, and we are not prescribing this. We're simply saying what we have found talking to our veterinarians and what we've talked about through our real world experience of treating a lot of horses, what has worked for us. But we're not prescribing this. You should definitely talk to your own veterinarian, make your own decisions with your own animals. I just wanted to get that out there. We're just talking about what's worked for us in the past here today.
Yep.
So let's say you nuke the mites. You got control of the mites, maybe 1 application or 2, and you have some scaly skin, you have some skin folds, you have cruddy feathers from exudate, maybe you have some ulcers, you have some, I call them ulcers, you call them melanders behind the front knee, and salanders. Salanders in front of the rear hocks. Crusty ulcer-like skin. What's the next step? And I know that can vary for the show person or a farmer like myself. The farmer like myself said, shave them off. Let's treat this horse. But a show person maybe doesn't want to shave the feathers off. What's the next step you would take for maybe a different treatment than this? What's the next thing you would do there?
The next treatment, especially for those that aren't going to shave and you can't necessarily wash a horse because of the weather or your conditions, the lime sulfur dip is a good solution. This has been used by a lot of rescues that have experience with CPL horses that have just taken in just drafts. So they've seen a lot of nasty legs. And that's a dip.
I got that from my veterinarian, by the way.
From your vet. And it can just be left on. It doesn't have to be rinsed off.
I haven't used it yet. I just got it. is it a shampoo or do you work it in with rubber gloves? And we should back up and say, always wear rubber gloves.
Always.
To protect yourself from this. If 30 mils is treating a ton horse, you don't want to get a lot of that in your own skin.
No, you should.
Always glove up.
You should always wear gloves. That can be applied many different ways. I've known people that because the horse was so had an aversion to having its legs touched because they're a mess. They don't want you to even look at their legs.
So a shoeing stock may be necessary in some
A shoeing stock or Dorm gel. Your vet can give you a tube of Dorm gel
to calm the horse.
To calm the horse down. It's oral, and this can be sprayed on with a bottle. It can be mixed into a bucket and just let the horse stand so that you're not agitating the leg, and causing the mites, because they're going to move around. It's a lot like giving your dog, a cap star or putting something on. When those mites start getting the drug, they're going to go nuts. And so you're going to see a reaction from your horse because of the mite movement. And that can just be left on. It can be sprayed. They can be soaked.
Should we work it into the feathers?
Yes.
Work it into the skin folds if we can?
You could put it in a cheap condiment bottle and squirt with one hand and work it into the feather with the other. And it can be left on.
Okay.
So,
what is I understand though that your preferred method, and I didn't get the right sulfur today. You like sulfur powder, and I got more of a granular. But can you talk a little bit more about your preferred method, how you've been treating horses, and why that way?
My preferred method, because I started off in the show world because I had no one to mentor under, and my horses came from a breeding barn, a show barn. And so there is no cutting of feather ever. And it is the best way. You should clip your legs, because if you don't know and you can't see it, you don't know what you're treating. And so it's good to have a visual on what the skin looks like when you first start. But for those that won't, they also had a concern with white legs, and sulfur powder is a natural antifungal, antibacterial, and antiparasitic. And the coconut oil that I mix it with everybody knows the properties of coconut oil. And so it's also a natural healing agent, and it heals sores but faster than any prescribed cream, or just as good.
Why coconut oil over mineral oil? I've heard mineral oil a lot. What are the difference?
Mineral oil sits on top of the skin, and so it does coat hair. And for folks that are just worried about pretty white hair and they've got good hair to start with, coating it will protect it. But coconut oil is an emollient, and so it moisturizes and soaks into the skin and hair. And I feel like it's a better carrier for the powdered sulfur because it gets it in the top layer or two of skin. And so you're carrying in the active ingredient. And even when you do wash, if you don't wash heavily and with heavy soaps that strip it, you can have nice white hair if you choose to leave it on that's moisturized. And when you part the hair, you can still see the sulfur will stay on the skin. And so I've managed to continue showing and leave hair on and still have that against the skin of the horse, which was so important. And I just like coconut oil for it has natural healing properties as well. I use a cheap grade that comes as a solid just because of cost and because I've treated other people's horses. And most of the time I'm paying for the product too, just to show them that it works and that it is worth the effort in getting it on and helping your horse.
Do you think it softens the skin too? Like when
it does.
Scaling?
It completely softens the skin. They say that once your horse gets melanders and salanders that there is no cure. I would probably argue that because I have taken horses that the front of the hock was completely open and the leg was blown up and it completely went away. The hair laid down, and as long as I keep that horse oiled even semi-regularly, never comes back.
What do you mean by semi-regularly?
For a horse that has terrible legs, open sores, you need to oil at least every 7 days. I know that's hard. Knees, backs hurt. People are, over their prime, and they just can't get out there because of the weather or jobs or whatever. So I tell people just oil as often as you can, and if you have problem areas, pre-mix a small tub, just put it in a butter bowl or whatever, and keep it to when you go out, just touch up the sores. because the hair is not the main concern here. It's the health of the leg.
I would imagine when the horse starts healing and feeling better and getting used to you touching there, and it's not excruciating anymore, it's going to go faster if the horse isn't kicking and moving. And
it's a huge change because after the first initial treatment, the horse already feels better days later. The sores are already starting to heal after just 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
And after 3rd, 4th treatment, they're okay with you being under there.
And you're saying oil them, but you mean with sulfur powder mix.
Always pre-mixed.
And you'll show, when we get outside, you'll show us the ratio or kind of how you do it?
Yes.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to bring up, something we've been trying, DAC Mineral makes a product called Yucca 5-Way. It is primarily for horses that are under heavy training or heavy stress athletically. It's an anti-inflammatory. I don't know if you want to get a shot of the ingredients on the rear, but I want to say it's health. Now, you inspected my worst mare, and did you find any compressible or hard swelling or compressible swelling? Yes, she has skin folds, and she has some bad skin folds. She has nodules, but we've kind of kept the swelling at bay. I think, and I can't even say I fed this regularly enough because they have other minerals I really like for foaling and breeding back and maintenance. But I fed the yucca quite a bit in this. When we're working our horses harder, like in the summer or a lot of hours, I can feed more grain and not feel guilty. Because, let's face it, we're asking them to put out an unnatural amount of calories. So that's the only time of year I can feed an unnatural amount of carbohydrates and calories to get more product in them. And I feed the minimal amount of grain, just enough to keep their body condition good and to get the minerals in I want. But I feel the yucca, and you looked at the ingredients too, that's definitely... And I know they talked about marigolds and cleavers and marigolds, but the price for someone like me with 12 or 15 or 16 horses, I don't know. We want to talk about the numbers in case Katrina hears how many we actually own, but that stuff adds up. That's a lot. It's expensive. And yucca and DAC, nothing's cheap. DAC has a quality product, and I can afford to feed that to my worst horses.
Right.
I do think good mineral supplement, because we're trying to keep the elastin fibers healthy. When the elastin breaks down, the lymphatic fluid no longer absorbs and moves out of the limbs, as described in every credible study done. So when your horse has mites and they're itching on everything they can itch on, they're just damaging more tissue down there. So anything we can do to keep them not irritated, supplement them internally. If we have to step up with shampoos or this coconut oil and sulfur, anything we can do to help them. And that's for the horses we already have here. But you and I agree, the phenotype that has it, you talked about it several times. First thing, shave the feathers off. Keep them shaved off so you can see what's going on. Well, that begs the question then, why are we breeding feathers on these horses? Right. So we need to breed a better horse for the next generation. And we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of this overnight. But history shows, and we can get into the books, history shows what these horses looked like 100 years ago when the farmers ruled the breeding and not the show rings, and they didn't have massive feathers. They had feathers. They didn't have what we have today. Right. And I think we need to get back to breeding a more moderate horse with a moderate amount of feathers and moderate bone to give them a fighting chance at a comfortable life. And so we're not managing them every 7 days. Right. I think that's the long-term goal.
It takes a lot of time.
So, this is now, what we can do to help the horses that we have and love now. And the long-term goal, I think we need to breed a cleaner horse.
Not be breeding these issues into the next ones.
And we got to select different genes. Yep. And make massive steps. Hence where the American Brabant came from. We crossed the American Belgian on the European Belgian, and trying to keep the mind of the European Belgian and try to breed cleaner legs like the American Belgian. We're trying to get the best of both worlds and not have either extreme, and breed a moderate horse like the Eve horse you examined. 14 years old, almost no CPL, plenty of bone. If we could reproduce her, but crossbreeding is not easily reproduced right away. This is a long journey, I understand that. Long term. And I don't know what to say about your organization. They pride themselves on the feathers and the white feet and all the action, but that's what we're trying to do with the ABA long term.
Yeah, the Clydes aren't really much of a working breed anymore, and people value all that hair. Yeah. But I've got a new mare, and she's more of the height that they were. 16'2", 3". Her bone matches her body.
And how's her legs so far?
she's 8 years old and her legs are perfect.
So
Perfect, no issues whatsoever. Nice flat bone, nice hocks, and she had a few sores when I got her, but they didn't understand that they were battling mites. You know, they were using tea tree oil, which probably kept it at bay, but one dose of ivermectin and I've not had to touch her. And she had feather that was chewed off. You can guarantee if you see a Clyde that has short feather and you're seeing a hoof wall, that you have got a mite issue. And they'll say they never see them chewing. They're mostly going to chew at night when they lay down, or when they rest, they're going to chew. And some of them can tolerate a pretty heavy mite infestation before they react to it.
I've heard that from Europe too, that the most heavily feathered horses with the thickest skin seem to tolerate this the best. Well, if they're numb or used to that much discomfort, maybe that is misinterpreted as tolerating. It doesn't still mean they have a good life.
No.
They're still dealing with it. They're just dealing with it.
No, but
they're dealing with it. They're being tough and being stoic.
Yeah, because as soon as you put your hands in there and try to mess with them, they get pegged as being difficult. You know, they're difficult. They won't hold for the farrier. They won't hold to be trimmed. They don't want their legs bathed. Well, as soon as you wet that leg, those might start moving, and then they become difficult. So, yeah, I mean.
Thank you for your time today. We'll get into some other things and shoot some more video today of how you treat these horses. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yep. Welcome back. So now we're out in the barn. We're going to treat Holly. She's the horse of ours with the most clinical symptoms. She'll be 14 years old this spring. She's a mare. Obviously, as you're going to see baby Noah, who's 10 days old, helping us through this situation. We treated her for mites, chorioptic mange, about 2 weeks ago. Holly, stand up here. It did help. She's scratching less or itching less. And we've got 3 of the legs clipped this morning. We're gonna show you clipping the last leg. I'd like to caution you that a lot of these horses, you're gonna have to get access to a shoeing stock or something to restrain them for your safety and for their safety. So yeah, I'll start clipping the last leg and just demonstrate that. Can you come around here? And I want to show somebody, when I'm walking up to a horse to evaluate, and you see these erect feathers standing out, this isn't bad. I've seen them standing out all the way down. When you see erect feathers just standing out like that, that's usually a bad sign. There's something going on under there. Her, like we talked about with that product we use from DAC, she doesn't have much for swelling of any kind, but she has some scaling over here, some skin scaling started. And this is usually a bad sign that there's something going on under there, some scaling or exudates, something making the feathers stand up like that. Either that or she's at least itching on them or chewing on them with her teeth. So we'll start trimming these off. Keep an eye out for that 200-pound linebacker, that he doesn't clean me out and the power cord. Not all of your horses are going to stand perfect. It's up to you. When I just got into a nodule there with the clippers that couldn't have felt good. It's up to you how you restrain your horse. What was the product you said, Sherry, that makes them calmer? Yeah, the Marcidan. Say it again.
Dormocidin.
Yeah, I mean that might be an option before a shoeing stock. Okay.
Okay, we've got the feathers clipped, which is always the best option. Some folks don't want to clip legs, especially in my breed, but it is always best to clip the leg to see what you've got going on. And now we're going to apply the coconut oil and sulfur. This isn't exactly the sulfur I use. You really want the powdered form. It's like a talc powder, at least the 90% purity, and most of what you're going to find is going to be Yellow Jacket brand sulfur. I use a 2-to-1 mix, so 2 parts oil, 1 part sulfur. You can get coconut oil at a lot of different places, Costco, big box stores, grocery stores. It's pretty easy to find. You can partially melt it a lot of different ways. In the winter, I tend to, leave it empty it into my big bucket and leave it there, and then take a heat gun or even a hair dryer and put it in a fixed position, turn it on, let it be heating up while I'm doing other things, and then it's ready to use. This has already been preheated. I'm just going to dump it in. It's a part solid, part liquid, so we'll just have to dig out the oil. It's already solidified again.
Get stiff again?
Yeah, so we may have to heat. But we've got probably a half a quart in there now. So I would mix 2 cups in with that. 2 cups.
And 2 parts of which?
2 parts of the oil to 1 part sulfur.
Okay.
But you don't need to, it's more of a consistency thing with it. You're not gonna get too much sulfur. There is no such thing. Just the more you put, the thicker the paste is gonna be.
Oh, my dog's gonna get fat eating coconut.
And so I just use a gloved hand to mix it together. And then we just want to apply it to the leg.
And the powder stuff would mix a lot better than the stuff
Yeah.
I bought, unfortunately.
This is granulated, so it's not going to be
When you say powder, you mean like baby powder?
talc. It'll look like talc powder, like baby powder.
Okay.
And just when you go to dump that or scoop that powdered form, you just want to be mindful not to breathe it in. You may want to wear a mask. It's not good to breathe that stuff in. We'll just start here with the first leg.
Watch the little guy. He doesn't hurt you. You want to go to the other side?
Sure.
For safety for him?
Yeah, let's
Or
go.
no, Josh, okay, Josh is gonna block.
Okay.
He can nurse on another side.
So I always start low first into the inside first because it's more difficult to reach. And I'm just going to work it into the leg. If you've got skin folds and nodules, you want to make sure and get it between the folds. And you want to get the leg to hold as much as it can. That way it stays on, and if you don't get right back to it in a timely manner, that you've got it soaked in well.
I can see now why the powder is important.
Yeah.
It did not mix thoroughly.
No, it doesn't form a solution unless it's pulverized.
She seems to like you working it in there. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm watching her expression. I know the horse.
And you want to be gentle with the ones that don't want to be touched, because you don't want to cause more problems.
You have a cat underneath you, just so you know.
Okay. And any kind of scabs, you want to make sure that you get those completely saturated with the oil. And just an example of another good reason to clip the leg, I have a mare that will hold 3 quarts of oil per leg. So that could run into a lot of money. You're just better off to get the feather off, see what you're doing, and then all the oil goes to the skin. This will soften the folds, soften the nodules. A lot of these legs will get, you want to keep them out of the moisture. You know, if you've got an open sore, you don't want a secondary bacterial infection from that getting wet and bacteria starting to grow. So you want to keep them dry. But if you keep them bedded and too dry, these calloused skin folds will break open just with movement, just like your hands do in the winter. So a hardened work hand that's calloused up, they'll crack and bleed at the joint. And these horses are no different. You'll get an opening in the leg, and like this horse has got, the thickened skin and the knots, but there's no puffiness to the leg. And one opening lets bacteria in, and that's when the legs start blowing up on them. So it's very important to keep the skin moisturized, and the coconut oil does that. And then the sulfur acts as an antibacterial, antifungal, to heal and promote healing of the leg. And I go to the knee, and just work it in good until that leg is done.
Okay. So we've just finished with the coconut oil and sulfur on all 4 legs of holly. Now, how often would you like to see me doing this treatment?
For an affected leg with sores, folds, all of that, every 7 days is a good start.
Do I have to do that forever?
No, once the leg is moisturized, a lot of the callus that will form on the skin folds, that will just crumble off as you moisturize. And so once most of that is gone, you can go to every month and see if the horse maintains well. And then of course, if it doesn't, you need to go back and a little bit more frequently.
Okay. Well, thanks for all your hard work today, and thanks for coming up here. Appreciate it very much. Sherry Holland from Tennessee and from the Clydesdale breeders. We'll shoot some more videos. Just shut it off, Josh.
There we go.
So we have Holly treated now, and you showed us your go-to treatment, I would say, that you've had probably the most luck with.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about, well, first of all, talk about the kind of results you have had, or anything you've heard of or recommended to you that you wouldn't recommend from your experience. And remember, we're not veterinarian professionals. We're just talking from our experience. Everyone out there has to do what they think is best for their animals and talk to their own vet. But tell me from your experience what your opinions are of different things and the results you've had with the treatment we've seen with Holly.
The coconut oil and sulfur, in my opinion, heals better and gives the best results of anything I've ever used. I've used hundreds of pounds of sulfur, thousands of pounds of that particular just cheap grade coconut oil, and it has improved every single leg I've put it on. Some of these legs, because they're predominantly Clyde and Gypsy legs, they're mostly a white lower limb. So you can see the condition of the skin. If it's pink and angry and it's got things going on, the coconut oil conditions the skin. The sulfur with the antibacterial, antifungal, and anti-parasitic properties heal the limb as good as prescribed creams I've used. The silver sulfa cream in particular, and you can do it for pennies on the dollar.
So we don't need anything fancy for sulfur powder, but like we showed yesterday, I got the wrong stuff, unfortunately. I had more of a granular. We're gonna have to see what we can do with that. But we need the powder, almost like talcum powder or baby powder.
Yes.
And you said this is the website that you can buy smaller or even up to 50-pound bags. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to show that. And you have to, on the website, you have to search for sulfur powder. I don't know what's a good, make sure everybody gets a second with that. dudadiesel.com. And you're looking for powdered, that doesn't make any sense. Powdered sulfur. I have powdered sulfur powder. I wrote it twice.
Yeah.
You're looking for powdered sulfur. It needs to be as fine as flour.
Yeah, it's a
and
fine,
then mix better.
Because sulfur is not soluble in many things, any solutions. It needs to be powdered in order for it to dissolve and stay in a mix.
Any stuff that just didn't work out, or you heard of adverse effects, or?
I've used everything. Of course, I started off with veterinarians first, and because, especially in my region, there are few drafts. There's not many around, and they're owned by Amish, and they don't see vets, so vets don't know just because they don't see them.
So you went through a lot of vets to find
14 vets before I found a vet that had seen a few Clydes and was willing to put in the time to learn. And so, I finally did find someone. I was prescribed scarlet oil by vets, which I would never recommend. It burns like fire. It's alcohol based. I've been prescribed mixes that they mixed up, the Furacin, the DMSO, which are good in their own right for what they're made for, but they didn't do anything for mites on legs. Also, this product here has a small amount of sulfur that you can see in the bottom of the bottle, but products like this are not required by law to have a full ingredient list, And there's been a handful of people that I know personally that have had burns on legs and adverse reactions, and they all used this product. And because the legs on these horses are white and the skin is pink, you could see exactly what it did. You had red, angry skin and patches of hair that fell out. I do believe with the same with people, you know, there's probably horses that do have sulfur allergies, but in the 74 that I have worked on, I have never seen one. And it is one of those nasty rumors that circulates on the internet. So I would always suggest doing a patch test first with the coconut oil and sulfur in a small spot before you apply it to the whole leg.
Commit yourself.
Just that way you know for sure that you haven't come across a horse that has a sulfur allergy.
So now you've worked on 74 horses. What kind of results would you say you've had? I'm sure results vary, but
the coconut oil and sulfur has improved every single leg I've put it on dramatically. For a horse that's covered in weeping sores, has secondary bacterial infections, within 2 or 3 days you're seeing improvement. And after 2 applications, the horse will let you know. They've calmed down. They're not fighting me anymore. They don't have to be drugged. If you do have issues, I don't know if we mentioned that yesterday, with the dormosidane gel that can be prescribed by your veterinarian, just tell them what you're doing and they'll tell you it's an oral sedation that can be used by owners. It's about $35 or $40 a tube. And I'll point out, the vet will be able to tell you, but the horse doesn't need to swallow it. You're wanting to put it in the cheek beside the gum and let it sit. It
absorbs.
Yeah, it absorbs into the gums, and that's how it works. So
and maybe if someone's timid or just plain wants, if they have a vet that's willing, maybe have the vet there the first time to help sedate the horse a little, help them get them feathers clipped. Maybe you'll help more horses if you can get your vet involved and get them on board with it. If the vet can see the results a couple days in a row.
We've done that whenever we had them scheduled for vaccinations or we were checking a mare. We just saved the treatment till we went to the vet. That way we didn't have extra fees incurred and the vet was there and did it that way.
Tell us about this cast.
This cast came about just last minute before I came here to Wisconsin. I had been searching for a manufacturer for several years that would be willing to build a draft size boot. We've got, Davis soaking boots that come up to the fetlock that have been available for years, but a full size boot. And I finally was able to get in contact with Jack's Manufacturing that has been building Whirlpool boots for a few decades for regular size horses and mostly for the front limbs. And on CPL horses, it almost always starts in the rear limbs and they're most severely affected. And so while I was here, we were able to cast one of the mares. And when I get home, I'll cast a few more and we'll send these in. And hopefully they'll get a boot in the works that we can use for multiple things, for soaking, for oiling, for icing.
I appreciate your dedication and flying across the country and then driving 3 hours and everything. And Sherry's not being paid. I'm not being paid. We're not profiting from any of this information. We're just trying to help horses. And with that said, we're trying to help the horses we have. But you and I both agree we have to breed a different phenotype. We have to breed a cleaner legged horse so the next generation can be affected less and the next generation can be affected less. Because let's face it, not every horse stands in perfect conditions and gets perfect management. We need a horse that is less susceptible to this. It's a debilitating progressive disease. It's terrible.
It's painful to watch. I think that we're supposed to be the caretakers of these animals, and it's our responsibility to make sure that this isn't continued on by continuing to breed this horse.
Yes, we have to stop hitting our head against the wall and make some serious changes. Even in breeding decisions like we're doing with the new breed, the American Brabant. We have to change the horse. So thanks for watching. We hope you found this helpful, and we'll put out more videos with the plans and any further treatments or any further tools we can come up with to help our horses. Thank you. So Sherry, we've had lots of discussion this weekend, and you said sometimes you feel overwhelmed of, the difference between an American Brabant and a European Belgian and an American Belgian. We've talked about that quite a bit. And you asked me why we're doing what we're doing. We have a little chart. I don't know if you can help me hold this to explain. So here's a horse named Brilliant. He was the champion in 1890. Is this showing up all right on the camera?
Yep.
And you see the phenotype of the Belgian. This is the Belgian horse. They even referred to it themselves as the glory years, from the 1880s to the 1930s. I mean, it was the Belgian pride. It was their #1 export. And you see the clean legs. You see the long rectangular horse that appears to have a short back. It appears to have a short back because it has a long, massive croup for power. It has proper shoulder slope that makes the back appear short, even though it's a long horse, creating a long underbelly. That's a huge benefit for the mares, to have enough room for a foal and to have enough room for forage. This is a horse, it's written over and over and over in all the historical books what an easy keeper it was. The horse is going to have less apt for interference between the limbs in various gaits because it's a long horse with short limbs. And we know a short limb is a more powerful horse. That's just a matter of physics. That's inarguable. Well, this horse has morphed into a modern European Belgian. This horse, they wanted more height for the show ring. And mind you, we're not arguing what people's vision are. You can breed whatever horse you want because we're not technically relying on them for our lives anymore. We have internal combustion engines. But this is the horse they envisioned for the show ring today. And it's a more square horse. This horse here in this particular picture is still quite long body, but with the length of the leg, it has turned into a more square horse. You see the back appears longer because the croup is much shorter and the shoulder angle is steeper. The entire horse is more square. You also see the massive limbs. I don't know how it's going to show up in the camera because it's kind of a darker photo. Massive limbs, massive feathers. From early 1900s on, that was more desirable in Belgium, Netherlands, Europe. They thought it was a more robust horse in their own words. But today the horse is predominantly a show horse and a meat horse. 85 to 95% of the colts go to meat every year, we're told. And this horse from the 1890s, their glory years, the #1 importer was the Germans, and it was the German Rhenish cold blood, as it's called today. They used to use a Belgian name, and the Americans. Well, the Americans have went this route. The hitch horse, long legs, shallow body. It's about action, and that's fine. Look at the neck set. Look at the rear end. But very clean legs. The Germans kept what we believe is the most similar phenotype to the original Belgian, the German Rhenish cold blood. That's why we've begun importing our Belgian stock from Germany. But the original Belgian horse spawned at least many more, but at least these types: the American type, the German type, and what they kept in Europe today. Well, the American Brabant breed is a combination of obviously modern European Belgians, some American Belgians. We try to stick to more of the pulling type than this hitch type, but we have all types. And now recently we started importing German Rhenish. We've also approved over 55, maybe pushing 60 old style Perchen mares. And these mares are clean-legged, deep-bodied. Look how long rectangular body shape. Look at the hip on that mare and the front shoulder. I personally seen this mare on a scale in Canada 10 days ago. She measured 16.3. She weighed 2,460 pounds. Granted, she's due to foal in a month. But that is a legitimate 2,200-pound Perchen mare at 16.3 in working shape. We have a few approved Suffolk Punch. They were usually grade mares crossed. Their lineage had been lost through the registries. But we know we have Suffolk Punch breeding we're letting into. They're, again, clean legs and the working phenotype. So all of these are the recipe for the American Brabant draft horse. That I hope clears it up for you and for many others. And you say, well, how did you come? Did you just make this up with a dream, or how did you guys come up with this? No. Our board is made up of working people making a living with these horses, and we have history. We have a book here, and this is the history of all the champions in the Belgische Trekpaarden, the Belgian workhorse, and the Ardennes. I don't know where you want me to hold it for the camera, but the first couple are artist renditions. So here's the champion, the Belgische Trekpaarden champion in 1886. You notice the body style we're talking about, and the clean legs, the short legs. 1887, dappled gray Belgian. 1888. Now here's the horse we used in our flow chart over here. Well, this horse here, I'm sorry, I should back up. This is Jupiter, and this is Brilliant. These two horses kind of kicked it all off. That's the phenotype we're trying to recreate with the clean legs. You and I have talked enough about clean legs and the dangers of the feathers and the problems it's causing. Here's my personal favorite, Perot, 1892. And in contrast, look at the horse, you know, they crowned champion in 1982. That's a totally different horse. Yes, Belgian genetics, but that's just selection of the genes, selection of the phenotype for what the heart desired. And that is a very different horse management. I mean, you would agree?
I would definitely agree.
That's a very different horse for management needs and even for purpose. So that's how we came to what our breed standard is, what our desire is for our phenotype of the modern American Brabant. We talked a lot about CPL scoring. Would you like, we can go through this once and help you understand how we're scoring these mares. So come around here. So we came up with a hypothetical horse. He's owned by Steve. This is the chart the American Brabant Association uses. So we came up with a theoretical owner named Steve. His horse's name is Slammin' Sammy. I guess he's a little rammy. So I would be the evaluator in this one, the date. We have what book he's in. He's a book 1, 88%. So he's a quite high percent European Belgian. Imported after 1972 is the percentage we're measuring, the verifiable percentage of European Belgian imported post 1972. If it's before 1939, we consider it an American or Canadian Belgian because nothing came in between those years. And they grew quite different. He's a sorrel, he's a stud, he's 9 years old, he's in his winter coat. That makes a difference. Horses have less feathers in the summer than they do in the winter, especially in these northern hemispheres. So then, trained and certified instructor would palpate the horse, and you're checking the legs. So we're checking for skin folds and nodules. 2 nodules equal 1 skin fold when we're weighting it. We are weighting the scores on skin folds and nodules, and that is based on the De Keyser thesis from 2007 from Belgian. Many people, even today, are referencing this thesis. Yes, this was a multi-year study, many horses. And we're using some of the recommendations out of there. And we're just trying to build a standardized scoring system. So people that go to a sale or are looking at breeders and they want to know, they know an A horse in West Virginia is very similar to an A horse in Manitoba, Canada. Or a B horse, in Wyoming is very similar to a B horse in Wisconsin.
So you're all speaking the same language.
So we're on the same page. Yeah. So I'll just quickly try to explain this. So Slammin' Sammy here has 4 skin folds on the back, usually on the back unless they're very severe and they start wrapping around to the front. 4 skin folds and no nodules on his right front. Then we made some other notes. U for an ulcer. E for exudate. S for scaling. I don't have any compressible swelling or any hard swelling written down. That was his right front. His left front has 5 skin folds and 2 nodules. Right rear, 7 skin folds, 0 nodules. Some other notes here: scaling, compressible swelling, ulcer, hyperkeratosis. Left rear, 9 skin folds, 0 nodules. Some more notes. And then the evaluator's other notes down here. But for scoring, I don't know if I should go into scoring. Roughly, if you go down here and they have 1 to 4 skin folds, they get an individual leg score of 1. They have 5 skin folds and 2 nodules, equivalent to 6 skin folds. 5 to 8, they get an individual leg score of 2, so they get a 2. 7 skin folds falls between 5 and 8, they get another leg score of 2. 9 skin folds falls between 9 and 12, that leg got an individual leg score of 3. And this is going off the De Keyser thesis, the recommendations we got. So we add up the individual leg scores, and it comes up to 8. We come over here to the summed overall leg score, 5 to 8. This horse is in the B range. Because it's 8 at the top of the range, we would just write down a B minus. And that's the European leg score of B minus. It's a hypothetical horse. Now, this is not to embarrass anybody. This is the only way we're going to get out of this problem is being honest, like any problem, is being honest and start evaluating it and start making good breeding decisions. He's a stud. He's 9 years old, so he's not a baby anymore. So it's not surprising that he's progressing some. And you also have to make notes of what he's living in. What are his management conditions? And that's not to embarrass the owner, but if the owner's got him standing in a crappy stall and no exercise ever, that's not going to help Slam and Sammy. That's going to make his score worse.
Right.
So that's kind of how we're doing it. I hope that answers some questions. But this is not us just coming up with it. And Belgian themselves, the people that are being honest, are making some of the same observations and how they've changed their horses. This is not attacking anybody. People can breed their vision of a horse all they want. What you and I have tried to do, I feel, this weekend, like you said over and over, is just being aware. I mean, you brought a lot of awareness to the shows you went to with your mare. I don't know if you want to tell that story, but...
Yeah, I was just sold a mare and had no idea, what was going on. Was told that she had pastern dermatitis, we could wash and do these things and it would all go away. And I soon learned that wasn't the case. So in searching for a solution to help this mare is what kind of brought me into all of this. And so once I realized it was a topic that it was hard to tell. Did they know and they were concealing it, or did they not know? Did they really think that they had pastern dermatitis, and because they lived up here in the north, you can't escape the mud. I mean, you just can't. I realize that I'm in Tennessee and I'm blessed to not have to deal with that as bad as here. But it was hard to tell if I was being told the truth or not. And I thought, well, I need to start telling other people like myself. I'm never going to be a big breeder. I'm never going to have 15 or 20 of these horses, but I did want to help the ones that I had. And so I did not shave my mare. Hindsight, I should have, but I just didn't know at the time. And then once I was able to get her under control with what I was doing, I thought, I'm going to take her to shows and I'm going to stand in the aisles of the barns and tell anyone that says, hey, oh, beautiful horse, I'd love to own a Clydesdale. Well, this is what you need to know. And so I started giving little demonstrations in the aisles with breeders who had horses for sale. I became unpopular really quick and ridiculed. And I didn't let it get in my way because I tried to keep inside that this was for my mare and that there was someone out there just like me who was looking for help and couldn't find it. And so it's come full circle now. I don't feel like I'm shunned as much.
People are reaching out to you for help.
And they're reaching out. The people that were dead set against me have come back around. I've never done any of this for myself. I didn't want to do any of this. I just wanted to get a couple of horses and enjoy them.
Well, we experienced the same thing.
Yeah.
We started having to call out Belgian on some issues and say, no, this is a real problem. This is not a minor issue like you're making it out to be. And it is progressive and it can be very aggressive. Mm-hmm. And we buried a lot of horses young in our association. So I do feel for you and I understand. And unfortunately, when there's money involved and pride involved, people just they come kicking and screaming to the table that we actually have a problem. But the American Brabant Association has, with the development of their own phenotype, their own registry and their own breed, has brought them to the table kicking and screaming, that they're finally now having to admit they have a problem. They want to blame it basically on mites a lot of times. Mites are a major issue, but the problem's not starting on the outside. You and I,
no.
we know that. It's a genetic problem from the inside out.
Yeah, you can't deny the pattern.
No.
And especially once I met you and saw the same similarities with the heavy bone and the massive quantities of feather.
Yeah.
In the wiry hair, you could almost guarantee before you ever touched that leg what you were going to see under there.
Yes. Well, it's nice finding other breeds that are, working to improve their breed and help them. And we have nothing against the Clydesdale, the Shire, the Gypsy Vanner, the Frisian, and they all have it. But we didn't let them into our registry. And we took a lot of heat from that. Well, you're taking American Belgians, you're taking a Suffolk Cross, you're taking old style Persians. Why didn't you let in my old style Clydes or my old style Shires? After I met you, it was like validation of why we didn't. We knew they had it. We knew they had feathers, and we were trying to get rid of the feathers. So would you agree for what we're trying to make for a phenotype?
I would agree. I mean, there's just not as, I've not seen these horses really used for work. They're more of a novelty. A lot of women my age fall in love with all that hair, and they are a beautiful horse. They're great for to take into the public. They're gentle. They're, amateurs. I was a total amateur and have been able to do a lot of things, and stand a stallion, all of these things. But I just don't think they're right for what you're trying to do.
Build a working horse?
A working horse, and mine are bred for hair. These breeds that I'm interested in, they're bred for more hair, especially the Vanners.
Yeah.
The more hair, the better, and those problems come along with it. So
it's interesting that the Suffolk Punch, they've advertised for a long time. They're the only breed left bred for the furrow, a working horse, and they never went the feathers route. And we use that we've used many things as a beacon and guides, and we've read old books and what the old importers and breeders used. This book's by Maurice Talene. I believe you can still get it. There's a lot of useful information there. We didn't invent the wheel and the ABA. We're just trying to recreate the wheel we had a while ago, But I appreciate everything. I appreciate you flying across the country and donating all your time, and the ABA appreciates it. And hopefully we can help each other with information in the future. Thank you, Sherry.
thank you. It's been a privilege.